Oh, for Hi, today I want to talk to you about how you can make failure work for you in your startup business. And it's not the failure that you know, where you give something a good hot crack and you fall flat on your face, you take some lessons, but you move on and you give up. That's more macro failure. I want to talk to you about the micro, smaller failures happening within your business. And the effort I want you to apply between that small failure and success is what I like to call optimal push. So the best way for me to explain my theory on failure range and optimal push is through this weight training analogy. And after I'll show you how I applied it to my $10 million startup. So imagine you're trying to do as many bicep curls with this barbell as possible in the quest of bigger arms. Pretty soon it's going to start to burn, and this is your failure range, right? And you keep pushing till you can't do any more. Eventually you're not going to be able to do a single one. But does that mean you failed your set? Absolutely not. The next step is the optimal push. You're going to try and figure out how you can do more. And in that scenario, that's, should you train in the mornings when you've got more energy? Should you be eating something before you train? Should you be consuming more calories and protein to grow? You start problem solving and figuring out all these different things so that you can lift more or do more reps next time. And I think this concept of failure range and optimal push happens everywhere in life. It really comes down also to the person's grit and resilience. Will they just give up when it gets hard, or recognize they can learn something from this micro failure and do something differently to push through it? Okay, so as promised, here's how I applied failure range and the theory of optimal push to my startup TwoSpace. So TwoSpace was a business that my co-founder and I started where we turned restaurants that were closed during the day into a network of co-working and office spaces. And if you're interested in that 6-year journey, how we hit a $10 million valuation and failed a lot, you're more than welcome to find that longer video in the description below or on my YouTube channel. I do a bunch of videos about that journey and all the lessons there. Now, we had a goal of about 10 locations when we first started. 10 venues, restaurants that we could turn into these office spaces. So we'd have a pretty cool network around Australia and Asia to begin with. And that goal was within our first year of operation. Now, think of our venues in this case as almost like the barbell reps, right? So we did our first venue, second, third, fourth, no problems. When we hit the fifth, that was almost like our failure range. That's when it started to burn and hurt, because every venue after the fifth or sixth one got really hard for us, and we started to lose venues and we didn't know what we were doing wrong. So that's when the optimal push kicked in, right? We were just trying to figure out how could we do things a bit differently so we could push towards that goal of 10 venues. And within the first 5 venues, there were 2 key things that really were holding us back. The first was that we used physical iPads as our check-in technology. So if someone would come into a restaurant that we were operating, they'd need to check into the iPad so that we knew they were a paying member and they could use their space for security purposes. But that meant for every new venue, we'd have to buy a new iPad, right? And as a bootstrap startup in its first year, we didn't have a lot of money to spend. We just got lucky that we got a few iPads from one of our strategic partners at the time for free. The second one was, we had to staff these sites, right? And again, in the spirit of doing things that don't scale, our founding team members were the on-site staff for the first 4 or 5 venues, right? So we didn't have to pay anyone. We were using ourselves as founders and early colleagues to staff the site. So you can imagine when we started looking for the 6th, 7th, and 8th site, that coming paired with a salary that we couldn't necessarily budget for this early on, because we didn't have funding, kind of threw a spanner in the works. So what was our optimal push for those 2 things? Well, for the iPads, we built our own Wi-Fi check-in technology, which essentially was, instead of having a physical iPad there, people would have to check in through the Wi-Fi network in order to get internet access. But we built an online platform where members could see each other, where they worked from, but that's also how they would have to check in. So we got rid of the physical costs of putting iPads in all the locations, which was great. And the second one was for staffing. We realized that we had a few champion members that used a lot of the venues. So we actually turned them into TwoSpace ambassadors, right? They got a bunch of perks if they helped us look after the sites, which was great. But eventually what we actually did is we stopped using so many restaurants as the venues. We started using hotel venues and hotel restaurants. And that's because a hotel, as you know, has 24/7 staff. Right? So by upskilling and training the hotel staff, it removed the need for us to start staffing and paying salaries in all these new venues. And the funny thing with this optimal push strategy, with these 2 problems that we solved, That allowed us to hit 20, 30, 40 locations because it was really a solution for scalability for us. So remember, failure isn't this convenient crutch you can lean on and blame every time you mess up. It's all about your failure range and your optimal push. As always, good luck, you got this, and I'll speak to you again soon.